About a week ago, I went skating with a few friends at our local skate park. I tried to grind a rail when I lost my balance and fell, using my left arm to break my fall, my first broken bone after 7 years of skateboarding. I was actually sort of proud of it, as if it was some sort of cool battle scar. The doctor said I'd have to stay in the hospital about 3 to 4 days after surgery before I could be released. I broke my ulna and needed a plate and 5 screws. The surgery went smooth and my parents brought me a few of my favorite movies and a nice assortment of snacks. They had to go to work the next day, so they ended up going home at around 7 p.m. My friend Sean stayed with me until about 9 p.m. and his mom picked him up to prep for school in the morning. Nurse Michelle, the blonde nurse, came in to give me my pain meds for the night, and I nodded off with the faint blue light of the small TV still playing my movie. I woke up at about 1:30 a.m. in a sleepy, groggy haze and opened my eyes halfway to see my blonde nurse come in and check my IV. She asked me if I needed anything. I mumbled no, and she turned off my TV and went to finish her rounds. This time, I was out cold. But later that night, I had the strangest dream, or maybe this actually happened, but I was too out of it to tell. The nurse came in again, but this time she looked different. I couldn't tell in the dark, but her hair looked matted and more coarse than it did earlier. It even looked a different color. She was also a lot wider than before. She crept in really slowly as if she was tiptoeing and just stood over me. I thought that she was inspecting my IV, but I never saw her reach for the bag or anything. She sort of just stood there hovering over me. I was so out of it, I couldn't even see her face. The dream felt like it lasted about 30 minutes. It almost felt like sleep paralysis. I couldn't move or talk, so I just closed my eyes and went back to sleep. The next morning, Nurse Michelle came in to bring me breakfast. I thanked her for checking in on me the second time last night, and she gave me a strange look as if she didn't know what I was talking about. I just figured that the strong drugs made me dream it all up, and went ahead and finished my breakfast. Sean came by again after school, and we watched Spooky Scary Sunday on YouTube and some funny skateboarding fails. My parents came by to bring me and Sean some dinner later that night, and they left afterward. Sean stayed because it was Friday night, and usually we would hang out and play video games on Friday nights. We both ended up falling asleep from boredom. Sometime after, I woke up to Sean shaking me frantically. He told me that he woke up to use the bathroom and saw someone standing at the door just staring at us with the door halfway open. He said he couldn't really tell who it was, but it looked like the nurse. But when he told her to come in, she just walked away. He said it didn't look like the older blonde nurse that normally comes in. I didn't think too much of it. I figured it was just another nurse doing rounds and checking on patients. No big deal. We watched some more YouTube and fell asleep. The next day, Sean had to leave. His parents were taking him to visit some relatives for the weekend. The doctor came to visit, and he said that I would have to stay 2 more days to confirm that the surgery was healing correctly. My parents came to hang out and eat dinner with me, and they went home to get some sleep. I had already finished all my movies, so at this point I was pretty bored. I scrolled through my phone to check my Instagram and looked at YouTube for a while until my eyes got heavy. I was so bored that the sleepiness came over me pretty fast, so I closed my eyes and passed out. I woke up to see that same nurse lady standing over me again. She looked as if she was adjusting my IV bag. Her name tag read, Nurse Sandy. She took a small syringe out of her pocket and shoved it into the IV. I asked her if she was changing my medication, but she didn't say anything. She tilted her head to the side with a creepy grin and eerily chuckled. I tried to sit up, but all of a sudden, the room went dark and my entire body went limp. My eyes slightly opened and I could hear words being mumbled as I slowly came back to consciousness. I looked around and realized I was no longer in the same room. Concrete walls and faded paint surrounded me. I began to panic as I realized that I had been drugged. There was someone sitting on the floor in the middle of the room with their back toward me. It was the strange nurse, just sitting cross-legged on the floor with candles all around her. She was mumbling some strange language. I had to get out of here. I could see a door on the opposite side of the room. I had to make a break for it before she realized I was awake. She slowly started to stand up as she continued mumbling louder. With some sort of long surgical blade in her hand, she stood still with her back still toward me, and I could now see what looked like some type of human organ in a bowl of blood, with a pentagram carved into the floor. I ripped my IV out of my arm and ran for the door screaming. I ran as fast as I could without looking back. I could hear her chasing me while laughing maniacally, but I couldn't tell how far behind me she was. There was no lights, and the hallway was long. I was in some abandoned part of the hospital. I kept opening doors and running, desperate for someone to help me. I was lost, but she was still coming. I ran into a dark room and hid behind an old exam chair. I could hear her footsteps on the cold floor getting closer. I felt warm liquid running down my hand. My suture had opened up, and I could hear her whispering in a raspy voice.
"Where are you, little lamb?"
Followed by an evil laugh. I held my breath as she walked by. I wanted to cry, but I knew I had to stay quiet. She turned around and started back down the hallway looking for me. I had to move. I slowly tiptoed into the hallway and looked for a way out. I could see a dim light at the end of the hallway. I started toward the door. I looked back to see the psycho running full speed at me.
"There you are."
I sprinted for the door and screamed for help as loud as I could. I burst through the door and ran into the bright lights of the hospital. 2 nurses and a doctor came out of an exam room and hurried over to me as I collapsed on the ground sobbing. As the mechanical door slowly closed behind me, I could see the crazy nurse standing in the dark at the end of the hallway, just staring at me. I pointed her out to the nurses, but when they looked back down the hallway, she was gone. There was blood all over my hospital gown. I guess I had ripped open my suture trying to get away. Who the heck was that lady? The nurses sat with me and patched my wound as I tried to explain what happened. I told them her name tag said Nurse Sandy, and they looked at me with horror in their faces. Apparently, there was a nurse named Sandy who worked here years ago. She was fired for performing strange rituals on dead bodies in the morgue. I called my parents to take me home. I didn't care if my surgery hadn't healed yet. I wasn't staying one more second in that hospital. I still have nightmares of being chased by that nurse. So, that's my story. I never saw that psychopath again. I'm terrified of hospitals now, and I'm going to take a long break from skateboarding.